Overlord. Volume 14, Chapter 4, Well-Prepared Traps, Part 4. The children under Brain's protection had already left this place. Have they made it out safely, I wonder? They were like seeds he had sown for the future, the source of his calm. Perhaps there was a 0.01% chance, no, a 0.000001% chance that one of them would grow up to become powerful enough to rival the Sorcerer King. These pipe dreams of his further improved his mood. Brain stood at the middle of the road, waiting for his opponent to get closer. It must seem terribly foolish. What he should have done was hide and wait for an opportunity to take revenge on the Sorcerer King, and not oppose the monster that served as their vanguard. An onlooker might say something along the lines of, "Look at the bigger picture, don't do something so stupid," to him. However, Brain's goal in life was to live by his sword, so he would rather blindly allow himself to battle with his all. After a considerable amount of time had passed, it was finally at a distance where he could make out most of its features. His opponent was not human. Yet he could innately understand that this light cyan giant was of a race far superior to his own. Not long after. So cold. From this opponent's direction was a gale whipped up and sent towards him, its temperature as cold as a frosty winter's day. Brain's entire body trembled, not because he had felt any bloodlust or an oppressive aura, but from the chill breeze alone. The white puffs of breath coming out of Brain's mouth proved that this was no illusion. What? He couldn't help but mutter to himself. Was his opponent a being that radiated cold air? Now that he thought about it, the gates just then, was it not shrouded in ice and then rammed into pieces? Just how cold is he? The gate wasn't small at all, so whatever domain this monster belonged to, was seriously terrifying to him. That said, he knew this already. Brain tightened his grip on his katana and waited for his opponent. His hands trembled, not out of excitement nor from the cold, but out of a certain emotion. The emotion known as fear. Time after another he lamented in his heart, the heart that told him to move aside and cower in the corner. That thing, although it is a monster, the way it pulled its halberd along the ground as it walked radiated a warrior's aura. If he curled up at the sides, perhaps he would be ignored like a pebble. The houses that lined the sides of the street had signs of life, but none seemed like they wanted anything to do with this. And because of that, Brain should perhaps do the same. If he did that, his life would probably be spared. But his legs refused to move. He was not running away from this one. He focused his strength onto the one hand that gripped the hilt and slapped himself with the other. All right. He no longer trembled. He had made his resolve, in body and soul. While it had already visually identified Brain's presence, the light cyan giant continued forward without changing its pace. The being that held a halberd in one hand emanated an ever-increasing sense of pressure as the distance between them gradually shrunk. Brain gulped down a mouthful of saliva. Brain waited, like a roadblock for the light cyan giant. Because of its overwhelming presence, Brain failed to notice that there were women behind the being until now. They were dressed in white, their skins a similar hue to its, their long hair were black, and from them were chill winds rushing towards him too. He was made acutely aware of their gazes on him. The enemy had not taken any action against Brain, who stood in their path, yet. He pulled out a bottle from the belt by his waist and downed it in one go. He drank another bottle after that, and another after that. In total, Brain had applied 3 types of magical buffs on his body. Even though he had drunk the potions, an act of aggression in and of itself, his enemies did not seem to plan to attack right away. Still, he felt something akin to fighting spirit from them. The distance between them had been close to around 5 meters or so. Oi oi oi, another sheer cliff to overcome, At this distance, it was made all the clearer to Brain that his opponent was a being that held absolute superiority over him. It had reached heights that Brain could never even hope to reach. To Brain, one who had raised his abilities by a mere finger's length in comparison, This was a being he had absolutely no chance of winning against. Even so, even though he knew that, Brain still refused to move aside. His opponent stopped its movement. The distance between them was 3 meters. Considering the length of its arm and the halberd in its hand, Brain was already well within its strike range. Brain Unglaus. He declared his name, raised his sword, and focused his mind. 1. Who serves under the camp of the Supreme Being, His Majesty. Ins. Owl. Gown, Cocytus. In the moment, Brain's eyes widened in shock. That was probably his opponent's name. He had not expected to receive a reply at all. While he was shocked, he also felt déjà vu. What was it? He felt like he had heard this name before, but he could not remember from where. Perhaps he was just overthinking it. And then, Brain felt unbearable shame at how rude he had been. The opponent in front of him was willing to respond to him, yet he was so rude to be lost in his own muddy memories. The reason why his thoughts went in that direction was because his opponent was a monster he could never hope to match. It was probably on the same level as Sabas or Ch4 Bloodfallen. That meant that to his opponent, he was nothing more than an ant in his way. Despite all of that, his opponent did not treat him like an inferior being. If their roles had been reversed, what would Brain do? He would have probably just cut him down without much consideration and continued on his way. Brain was so insignificant in comparison to his opponent, he probably couldn't even leave an impression of himself in his mind. Brain straightened his back and gently lowered his head, like what a student would do for his instructor. Thank you very much. No need. Brain gripped onto the hilt of his katana tightly. Stronger, stronger. To raise his weapons against a being who possessed overwhelming power without a plan felt like he was betraying the goodwill of those who had saved him. What he was doing right now was no different than suicide. Also, if he thought about it, of what use would stopping the enemy here have? None at all. Yet still. I'm such an idiot, this Cocytus Dana couldn't be the only one attacking the city. I have failed those two. No, I'm no longer a child. My future is what I make it out to be. That's right, it's in my hands and my hands only. Cocytus, who was looking at Brain, stuck his halberd into the ground. God. Slaying. Emperor. Blade. An otaki of gigantic proportions, much longer than Brain's height, was pulled out of thin air, with which Cocytus assumed the Jotun stance. TL's note, one of the 5 stances in Kendo. This was such an honor. Words need not be exchanged. Cocytus had already conveyed his wish to resolve this by the blade. Brain breathed out heavily and rapidly drew in air again. It was like he was trying to expel all of the air remaining in his lungs. He was completely defenseless while doing so, yet Cocytus did not move a single inch. From his posture, Brain could tell that he held massive respect for him. Not only was his strength top tier, but so was his character. If he was of a similar level to the monster known as Ch4, then he could probably make use of his weapon at speeds far greater than anything Brain could achieve, even in such an upright position. Even so, Cocytus still held his stance. This wasn't because he viewed Brain as a formidable opponent. But under the pretext that Brain had made his resolve, Cocytus was treating him with the honor of a fellow warrior. Such an action overwhelmed Brain with joy. He's not the same as Ch4. No, it would be rude of him to compare the two. Ch4. Cocytus. I swear I heard his name somewhere. I think no, don't. How are you still wasting time on these unnecessary thoughts in times like these? What an idiot. Brain concentrated his brain power solely onto the matter of victory. To parry the Jotun strike of this giant's otaki would undoubtedly be difficult. If his opponent had similar physical attributes as Ch4, receiving the blow with his katana on its own would not be able to stop it in its tracks. Brain's head would probably be cleaved in half, his katana would probably break too. So, should he try to dodge Cocytus' first strike? No, even if he got lucky and dodged the first attack, it's not like his opponent would just stop there. The second and third strikes were sure to be continuous after that point. The common strategy would be to deflect your opponent's first strike and counter-attack while they're correcting their stance. However, against this extraordinary foe, to even disrupt his balance and stance would require Brain's full strength. That meant that even if he achieved this, he would not have enough strength left over to counterattack. Because of that, Cocytus would probably end the fight by slashing upwards as a follow-up. Which meant that this is a do-or-die situation, isn't it? He remembered something Vesture had said to him. If he wanted to win against Cocytus, he had no options other than to strike a few milliseconds faster than him. That said, even if he managed to pierce Cocytus' body or head, it would not change the path of his blade. The battle would end with both of them striking each other. So he had to aim for Cocytus' wrist, the one holding onto his blade. To wish to move faster than a monster on Ch4's level and cut down his wrist was an absolute joke. But this is my only option, I have no choice but to use that move. Brain lowered his waist. He adopted the posture for the technique capable of cutting down Ch4 Bloodfallen's nail-hidden blade nail clipper. No. This was no longer merely hidden blade nail clipper. Originally, nail clipper was a move that incorporated the martial art that guaranteed a hit, field, the lightning-fast god flash, and fourfold slash of light. The crystallization of every skill under Brain's employ still took all of his strength to chip off Ch4's nail. Of course, to have cut off her nail was already a momentous achievement. It would not be too strange for it to become a legend passed down through history even. However, Brain did not rest his laurels there. He continued to push forward for the sole purpose of reaching the same peak as she did. It was for this reason that Brain sought to become stronger, going as far as to request assistance from that person Ch4 Stranov's teacher and former adamantite-ranked adventurer, Vesture Croft de Leoin. Under his assistance and through non-stop training, he was finally able to use sixfold slash of light. Unfortunately, he was unable to reach the level of understanding that Ch4 had of that art. So while the use of field and god flash remained the same, the use of sixfold slash of light over fourfold slash of light made it a new technique. Martial arts used something akin to focus. The stronger the martial art was, the more of it was required. Exceptional warriors, higher-level warriors, while they had a greater capacity for it, would also find it difficult to use multiple martial arts at the same time. Indeed, Brain had greater reserves of focus than your average warrior, but he had already reached his limit back when he used nail clipper against Ch4. So it should have been impossible for him to use sixfold slash of light, a much more focus-intensive art than fourfold slash of light, with his other martial arts. There was only one reason why he could, despite all of that. The Brain Unglaus who stood there had already surpassed Ch4 Stranov. He had entered the realm of heroes. All of this culminated in Brain's new technique, True Nail Clipper Copyright. Cocytus moved his foot slightly forward to close the distance between them, a really short distance that was. Considering the difference in their strength, it would not be strange for Cocytus to easily close the gap between them and hack straight down with his katana. So why did he do such a thing? The answer was simple: he wished to grant Brain a death that was befitting of a warrior. Brain's appreciation for Cocytus as a warrior deepened once more as he assumed the stance of True Nail Clipper Copyright. Not yet. Not in range. The magical buffs granted to Brain by his potions meant that he was much stronger than he was when he faced Ch4. Even so, the human named Brain Unglaus could not hope to reach the domain of the monsters like Cocytus. There was nothing he could do about it. After all, it was impossible for an ant to prevail against a dragon. A fact that was hard to swallow, but he had to nonetheless. Still, he did not wish to lose. What should he do? It would be good to reduce the overwhelming gap in strength between them even if by a little, but how should he go about accomplishing that? I am a warrior, so I must do as warriors would. Ability boost. Brain activated a martial art. He had expended all of his reserves for true nail clipper copyright, there should not have been anything left for other martial arts. However, Brain's eyes began to fill with blood and blood began to stream down his nostrils. His capillaries had just burst. A shing sound rang out as if to signify a transition. His physical capabilities were boosted to the next level. He activated another martial art. His physical capabilities were boosted once more. But not yet. He was still unable to do it. So what should he do? There was only one answer. Brain activated yet another martial art. Greater ability boost. Brain Unglaus had yet again achieved something impossible. He did not know this himself. The true nature of his talent was an increase in his focus capacity. Only with this and the addition of his higher levels was he able to activate the martial arts required by Nail Clipper. But, even so, Brain had his limits. He could not use any more martial arts than that, a limit imposed upon him by the world. But, in that moment Brain broke the rules of this world once more. A second miracle of this kind. The first was when he cut Ch4's nail. The second was made in this moment. The consequence of breaking the rules was that his body began to deteriorate. His body probably won't last for another minute. However, to those who were strong, a minute was a long time. Cocytus entered into Brain's range. The god-slaying Emperor blade in Jotun. Brain pulled out his own katana to receive the attack from Cocytus' katana. And then, the sound of blood and flesh being rended could be heard. After swinging the god-slaying Emperor blade, Cocytus shook off the blood and fat from the katana and returned it to its space. He pulled his halberd from the ground and looked down at the corpse of the man he had just slain. He was a fine warrior. Cocytus was unscathed, the blade did not manage to reach him, yet his skills as a warrior was commendable. I have never heard of such an excellent warrior. It was such a shame that he had to kill him. If it was possible, he wanted to save his life and have him become loyal to his master. He could have easily broken his opponent's sword, tanked his hit, or broke all four of his limbs, but that is not the way of a warrior. Cocytus had already sensed it when he saw this man standing on his own from afar, he knew it all the better when he stood face to face with him. This was a warrior who had made his resolve. Cocytus could not dishonor such a man. He knew exactly how beneficial it would be to bring him under their rule, but still killed him. It would not be wrong to say that he had betrayed Nazarick. Still, he wished to converse with him through the clash of their blades. If warrior Takemikazuchi were here, he would probably praise Cocytus for his decision. By levels, he is probably around level 40. However, he felt that other than that single strike, there wasn't much else power in him. Perhaps it was something like Cocytus' Vidyaraja strike, or perhaps he had used special abilities to strengthen himself. He was insignificant in comparison to Cocytus, but in this world's terms he was strong. Cocytus picked up the katana. Brain dropped. I will be taking this. Among the weapons in Cocytus' possession, this was exceptionally weak, something that was practically useless to him. Perhaps it would be better to lay the sword by his side to mark his grave, but Cocytus decided to take the sword. He was not too keen to leave his body as it is. You all freeze this man. After he gave his command to the Frost Virgins, the body of the man named Brain began to slowly freeze over. Just as Cocytus was about to step over Brain, he stopped himself again. He looked towards the castle behind Brain. Cocytus turned his head around while deep in thought. He turned right and walked into a path that was narrower than the one before. He walked down the path until he emerged onto the main street again, after which he took another right turn. He walked along while confirming the castle's position, taking every right turn detour that he saw, which brought him back to the main street. Cocytus looked towards his right. Brain's remains were now quite a distance away. Cocytus then silently walked towards his left towards the castle. "Hello, don't get in my way," Aura called out to the cowering soldiers on top of the city walls. She made use of the imperfections along the wall to make her way up in a single breath. While the soldiers at the top wanted to use their spears to attack, what they witnessed next were inhuman movements. She jumped over the soldiers, spun around midair, high up, and landed perfectly on the other side of the battlements. V. Her hands formed into a V-shaped gesture for the lined-up soldiers to see. The eyes pointed towards Aura, whose appearance was that of a child's, were all filled with fear. Having seen her unusually light body in action, surely none of them still believed her to be a normal child. Plus, there was also the matter of the magical beast down below, waiting for her. Aura ignored the humans and pulled out a piece of paper from the pocket by her waist casually. The soldiers advanced towards Aura step by step to surround her. Their spears were pointed towards her, yet she continued to ignore them. "Okay, everybody. I'll say this again, do not get in my way." Aura unrolled the paper to compare the capital in front of her with what was drawn on the map. If all of the landmarks matched up, it would be much easier to read. She easily found the Magician's Guild, her first intended destination. Aura, now satisfied, turned around to see the soldiers surrounding her. The tips of a few spears were positioned right in front of her eyes at a distance where a slight movement would cause her to touch them. Say, even if I was the only one to have climbed up here, was it really a smart idea to focus your attention on me? You know they'll come up here as well, right? The soldiers looked at each other and sprung like springs to the outer edge of the walls, but it was already too late. Aura's magical beasts climbed up the wall one after the other. Their surroundings echoed with the pitiful wails of other soldiers. Aura had greater combat prowess than them, and while it was true that appearances could be deceiving, this was still too much to bear for them. The soldiers, who had completely lost their will to fight, began to stampede over each other to get out of her vicinity first. There still were soldiers who held the idea that this position had to be defended, but with so many of their compatriots scurrying away, it was hard for them to maintain their morale. The city walls were thick, so the battlements were quite wide, but the fear-driven soldiers still pushed and shoved each other in their attempts to run away. If there was any semblance of order to their route, they would have probably made it out faster. Those pushing each other at the front made for an absolutely chaotic getaway. Although it would be trivial for the magical beasts to chase after them and exterminate them all, they were not interested in doing that at all. They had not received orders from their master yet, which was why they were letting them go. That was true for all of the magical beasts except one. A level 71 magical beast, the largest one she had brought along for the occasion, an Iris Tyrannosaurus. Its posture matches that of the Tyrannosaurus rex, but it also has dorsal fins at the back. As its name suggested, it shined with vibrant light. Aura wasn't too sure on the specifics, but she did remember that her master had said, its original design had to be based off of the King of the Monsters trademark. TL's note: yes, Godzilla. The Iris Tyrannosaurus roared. A roar loud enough to make the ground clatter. That wasn't to assert dominance or an expression of its own emotions. It was a type of special ability, petrifying bellow. If one had a similar level to it or had resistances against mental effects, it would just be an annoying roar. The rooting soldiers were about to demonstrate what would happen if you satisfied neither of said conditions. Fear twisted their expressions to the extreme as soldiers began to fall. Fear induced instant death. It did not do this because the death of the scurrying humans brought it joy, but simply because it had found the inconvenience of having to constantly shift its sideline around to be annoying. The soldiers died for that kind of a reason. But it wasn't as though the Iris Tyrannus Basileus came out of this unscathed. The cost of such a power was great. Surrounding the Iris Tyrannus Basileus were 5 of the 6 remaining beasts: the level 78 Fenrir, the level 77 Hound of the Wild Hunt, the level 76 Kirin, the level 76 Amphispina, and the level 74 Basilisk. The Kirin started off by bucking it, followed by the Hound of the Wild Hunt trampling on it. The other magical beasts joined in one after the other to kick the Iris Tyrannus Basileus. "You're too damn loud," was probably what they were trying to convey. While combat prowess had nothing to do with this, it was still getting bullied by magical beasts with higher levels than itself. The Iris Tyrannus Basileus tried to seek sympathy from Aura by whimpering, which only caused the other magical beasts to intensify their attacks. If their previous attacks were comparable to that of the seniors of a club disciplining their junior, what was happening now was more like a beating brought on by its own faults. As a side note, the only monster that did not participate in the beatings was the level 58 avaricious frog named Gagarpur. It was a magical beast that looked like something straight out of somebody's nightmare, like a giant frog, but wrong. In its mouth were rows upon rows of dirty yellow teeth, and its eyes looked like that of a lecherous middle-aged man. "That's it. Guys, I'm not angry, stop bullying Iris-chan right now." Aura crossed her arms and looked at the magical beasts with half an eye open. The magical beasts began to cry. All right, I'm not angry at you either." After she said that, the magical beasts other than the Iris Tyrannus Basileus gathered around Aura and used their giant bodies to nuzzle against hers. "Mayu!" Aura let out an adorable cry. While her physical strength was no less than any of theirs, getting pushed around by their giant bodies still made her let out that sound. Hey. Gimme some space." In front of Aura, who was clapping her hands together, the magical beasts began to line up. That said, their bodies were huge, so lining up single file was quite difficult. Each of them found a spot to stand in and switched to uptight expressions. The playful attitudes they had when they rubbed against Aura was nowhere to be seen. "Now, we'll begin invading into the capital to take over a few of those buildings. It's just sad that a few of you children might not be able to shine is all." The largest of the bunch, the Iris Tyrannus Basileus, began to look indifferent. "Then I'll give you a special mission. Walk along the city walls and squish any humans you see." Boo! The Iris Tyrannus Basileus roar shook the air around them, its voice gradually trailing. It lowered its head and cautiously looked towards the other magical beasts and Aura. Great. Now then, everyone, the operation has begun. Quick. Aura jumped down from the city walls and successfully entered the capital's perimeter. She landed on top of some random roof and ran along the rooftops. The magical beasts followed along and jumped. Each of them moved in a weightless manner as they trailed behind Aura. While turning around to check on the magical beasts, Aura noticed that the Iris Tyrannus Basileus was swinging its thick and girthy tail around. Aura waved to it, causing it to wave its tail around with even more fervor, incidentally destroying a part of the battlements. "You need to get moving too." The Iris Tyrannus Basileus jumped up for a second after she gave her orders telepathically and began to ponderously walk along the walls. Aura's first destination was the Magician's Guild. Because it was home to numerous magic items, it should be on high alert. It was widely considered to be the place that would put up the greatest amount of resistance in the capital. Although the enemy's combat strength was not an issue, to gather every piece of magic item in that place would probably take a considerable amount of time. Perhaps she would have to call in reinforcements. Aura cut across the capital through its rooftops as she pondered these things. The capital spanned a vast amount of land, but to Aura's speed when she was serious, it wasn't a problem at all. Not long after she had jumped from the city walls, she arrived at her destination. None of the magical beasts had slowed her down. Well, no, Gagarpur would have slowed her down, so it was carried along by the basilisk. Along the long perimeter walls were 3 5-story towers. The Magician's Guild, what was essentially multiple 2-story tall structures that were taller than they were wide, had shut their grid-shaped gates. To the sides of the gate were 2 2-story tall gatehouses. She had not detected the presence of people outside, but human activity could be seen inside. Humans were on the watch. Aura jumped into the guild's land and looked at the map in her hands, comparing the building's appearances. That's there, so this is here, right? Utilizing the intel they had received from their corroborators within the capital, they had a rough sketch of the guild's appearance. Magic items could be somewhere within here. However, because there were multiple probable spots for them, they weren't exactly sure where the magic items were kept. They were not able to capture any high-tier magic casters to question, so Aura had to make her own judgment. While it was tiresome, the land area held by the Magician's Guild meant that this was much more efficient than a human wave attack. Let's go then. At the same time Aura began marching towards the gates, people emerged from it. There were 5 men and a woman. An elderly figure stood in front of them. Aura suddenly thought, oh. If they held significant ranks within the Magician's Guild, it would save her a lot of time, but Aura couldn't help but feel disappointed after taking a look at the elder. The elder had to be a warrior from his appearance. He wore typical dojo attire, black from the waist down and #48929B from the waist up. 2 swords hung by his waist side and a breastplate covered his torso. He had a full head of white, not a single strand of hair was black. His arms were slender, as expected of his age, yet they did not sag. They were thin yet hard like steel. Beast-like perceptive eyes sized Aura up from top to bottom multiple times. Probably, let us confirm it first. Boy. You are a subordinate of the Sorcerer King, are you not? Aura surveyed the humans behind the elder. While they wore similar clothing to him, none of them was with swords. This elder was probably the master of a dojo then, with the others being his disciples. While she couldn't figure out what connections the Magician's Guild had to a dojo, there had to be a connection for them to be protecting this place. Although she felt like they might be able to provide more intel to her than the average magic caster, it would probably be non-essential intel anyways. Why are you not answering? I will have you know that I will not go easy on you, even if you are just a brat. To have put up such a front in spite of Aura's magical beast was probably because they had not shown any malicious intent or bloodlust. Or perhaps their opponents were brave, had made their resolves, and were confident in themselves. If you're willing to become my guide, I won't kill you, you know? Ah, these children won't attack you either. Aura planned to keep that promise, since Mare would kill them all later anyway. You dare babble your mouth, brat. You may not pass beyond this point. I cannot allow that demon summoning item to fall into the hands of people like you. Aura lost her composure and laughed. Finding out that the thing was still here was enough for her. She had to secure it and give it back to Demiurge. Ah, is that so? So what's your answer to my question? I refuse. In any case, vs. The elder fell down with a thud. Aura had let loose an arrow. The elder's head, pierced by Aura's lightning-fast arrow, split open like a pomegranate. Its contents spilt all over the place. I don't have time for chit-chat. Well then, next looks like everybody's feeling the same way, huh? If that's the case, how about you run in and grab a powerful-looking magic caster to help me out? The humans lined up behind the elder were stunned, expressionless. Aura felt like it would be too troublesome to wait till their brains had rebooted, so she gave an order to her beasts. Kill them all. Aura spoke as she walked towards the gate. The magical beasts zoomed past her like a whirlwind and pounced on the remaining humans. Only blood and guts remained on the ground afterwards. Mare sat by himself on top of the second highest tower in the castle, overlooking the capital. In the battle that commenced 3 days before they had arrived at the city, Mayor had killed a significant number of humans. Most of them were men, however, he had not seen women or children among their ranks. In that case, what was left behind were probably all of the weaklings. Mayor's expression was filled with sorrow. He could no longer keep count of how many times he had run those numbers in his head. He couldn't figure it out. What should I do? If someone was around, Mayor would have consulted them, but no one else was there. Well, no, the Hanzos should be there, but they wouldn't appear in front of Mayor. Plus, it was useless to ask them this question. What should I do, to destroy a city this vast more efficiently and kill every human within it? Before Mayor came to the capital, he had destroyed multiple cities with his master and gained relevant experience for it. That was why he had a clear understanding of how difficult it was to destroy a city, of how difficult of a task it was to kill every single inhabitant in it. Repeated and continuous use of magic could destroy every structure in the city and render it into a mountain of rubble, but to guarantee that everything within the city died along with that was a difficult thing to do. For example, if he used magic to induce an earthquake, it would destroy all above-ground structures as well as underground facilities. People within said structures would largely be crushed to death or buried alive. A magically induced earthquake could not affect things outside of the spell's range, so people hiding in houses in other areas would not notice. The sound of collapsing buildings and the wails of people dying was another matter entirely. If people heard those noises, there might be a lot of people who would come out of hiding to investigate, look out of windows, or something. People who cover their eyes and ears in fear were the best, because if they coiled up into balls inside their own homes believing that things would soon pass over, he could just cast another spell and be done with them. What the problem was, were people who believed that they would be the next to be crushed or the inherently brave bunch. What was even more troublesome were the weaklings who would become suicidal under stress, causing them to run in unpredictable directions. Their moods were infectious. Once an inhabitant noticed those who were running away, they would abandon their homes to run away too. If they chose to run to still standing structures, things would still be easy. However, terrified people tend to make irrational decisions such as choosing paths through collapsed areas or even try to save others trapped under the debris. They made the situation much more difficult to handle. I really wish they wouldn't run away. If it turned into that kind of a situation, he would have to use another AoE spell to kill them, effectively doing twice the work for the same result. If not for the time constraints, doing things twice over wouldn't be such a big deal, but this was an operation carried out alongside his master. There was no way he could allow such a thing to happen. Reason being that he would be wasting his master's precious time, but also because he would feel ashamed from having to admit that he wasn't good enough to end it in one go. If it was an earthquake-related solution, he could not guarantee that it would kill everybody. There would be more survivors than he would have expected. While he could start a fire just in case to kill those who remain, a fire would be highly visible to people far away. It could also trigger primal flight responses, causing even more people to run away. What a dilemma. I have to practice more and become more natural at this. Byakubuku Kagama had gifted Mayor the ability to destroy large quantities of enemies. In terms of how wide of an area he could affect, Mayor was confident that no other floor guardian could rival his abilities. That was why if he could not successfully destroy the city and kill all of its inhabitants, it would make him question his own worth and existence. Perhaps Byakubuku Kagama would be angry to see Mayor like this. NNNNNG. Mayor couldn't help but imagine Byakubuku Kagama disciplining him, causing his eyes to water. Before the tears could fall, Mayor wiped them away. I have to try my best, Insama said that too. Mayor was deeply respectful and grateful towards Ins. If Ins had not let Mayor to practice demolishing cities and to accrue experience over multiple tries, he would not have been able to grow as much as he did now. Now that he thought about it, back when the war first started, Mayor was asked to destroy a small town. The results of that event were honestly terrible. Those were results that would bring shame upon Byakubuku Kagama. But while Mayor took a gigantic hit to his ego, In's gentle words made him so happy that he could cry. Ins had told Mayor that as long as he understood that he lacked experience in something, all he had to do was study hard to better himself. If one of the guardians had told him that, it would not have moved Mayor as much as it did. However, the one who said it was a being of equal status to Byakubuku Kagama, one of the supreme beings. Mayor made his resolve. He will destroy more towns and cities and kill more people to become the person Byakubuku Kagama wanted him to be. Okay. While his voice was still that of a cute child's, his tone was filled with an unusually strong spirit, not expected of Mayor. If the other guardians were to see him now and compare him to the Mayor they knew, they would probably be shocked speechless. I'll do it right. Mayor's hands clenched into fists as he held them in front of himself. In any case, he had to make practical use of what he had learned so far. To destroy the capital and kill all of its inhabitants. Hey hey, ho. Mayor threw his tightly clenched fists upward. The Hanzos hiding behind him raised their fists as well.